This is the Banff Springs Hotel, Canada's castle, nestled at the base of the Canadian Rockies, built as a catalyst to import the tourist to the peak of these Canadian Rockies by rail. And in this video, I'm going to take you through my 2-night stay at the most famous hotel in Canada, from first-class accommodations to the unmatched culinary experience, from swimming in glacier-fed lakes to stories that you'll have to hear to believe. This is the Banff Springs Hotel. Let's begin. Now, this video was filmed in April of 2024, and the Banff Springs Hotel truly is Banff's castle, but it's also, most importantly, the most pivotal and grandest of Canada's railway hotels. So let's rewind to the late 19th century to begin that story. It's Montreal in 1878, a city humming with promise, as the Canadian Pacific had just opened the Windsor Hotel to attract rich European travelers to experience the Great White North, and as a checkpoint to begin building an ocean-to-ocean railway to connect the country with the most luxurious of hotels along the way. Now, this list of Grand Railway hotels today includes the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City, the Fort Garry in Winnipeg, the Bessborough in Saskatoon, the Palliser in Calgary, the Hotel Macdonald in Edmonton, Hotel Vancouver in Vancouver, the Chateau Lake Louise, and the Banff Springs here in the heart of the Canadian Rockies, just to name a few. The Canadian Pacific had just completed their coast-to-coast railway in November of 1885, driving the last spike to connect the Atlantic to the Pacific here in Craigellachie, BC, just outside of Revelstoke. But 2 years later, in 1883, they discovered the Banff Hot Springs, and once Canadian Pacific's visionary Cornelius Van Horn saw it, he uttered the famous quote, "If we can't export the scenery, we must import the tourists." Now, across the prairies, passengers would get to indulge in these deluxe dining cars, but the soaring peaks and the plunging valleys in the Kicking Horse Pass, along with the treacherous, avalanche-prone area of the Rogers Pass, made it impossible to haul these dining cars by train without the risk of a major accident. I mean, the 5% decline alone down Mount Stephen was too much for these heavy dining cars of the day. So the railway hotels were the solution for passengers to hop off and have a meal during their 5-day journey across Canada. And the Canadian Pacific began construction on the Banff Springs Hotel in the fall of 1886, and the grand opening was June 5th of 1888, and the 5-story hotel, seemingly reaching to the peaks of the Rockies, would charge an astronomical $3.50 per room per night. Pretty pricey for the time, and just imagine if they knew what rooms were going for today. Now, the Banff Springs Hotel offers a breathtaking view of Mount Rundle to the west and the Fairmont mountain ranges to the east, while looking down towards the Bow Falls, which actually flow east from the Banff Springs all the way into Calgary, not far away from the next closest Grand Railway hotel, the Palliser. And don't worry, I'll have a dedicated video on the Palliser coming up in this series. Now, at the dawn of the 20th century, the Banff Springs Hotel would begin a never-ending series of expansions, so stick with me here. In 1900, they built a west wing to the hotel, and in 1903, they were connected with the original east wing. And by 1903, the hotel's demand was so large that they were turning down about 5,000 guests a season. And by 1910, Canadian Pacific had just completed their brand new passenger station today, known as the Banff Heritage Station, which you see here, and passengers got an incredible greeting from the Canadian Rockies looking down on them, regardless if they were arriving east or west. And this station also meant another expansion in 1911 of the hotel, which included the brand new Banff Springs Golf Course, as well as a center tower, which was then completed in 1914, and they even planned a natural hot spring pool at the front of the hotel, which never came to life, but instead they built 2 pools in the back. More on that later. 1915 saw the golf course expand from 9 holes to 18, and the Banff Springs is a Scottish castle, so it only makes sense that they would keep Scotland's favorite pastime near and dear to their hearts. And in 1925, Canadian Pacific would begin destroying the wooden wings and begin replacing them with a rock-faced fireproof structure, but ironically enough, in 1926 the wooden wings caught fire, destroying the dining room, the tower windows, and the original wings. And although that may seem like a bit of a setback, most of the old wings hadn't been demolished yet, so the fire actually sped up Canadian Pacific's timeline to create this new expansion. And in May of 1928, they opened the version of the Banff Springs Hotel that we would all recognize today, and by the end of the year, Canadian Pacific's collection of Grand Railway hotels in the Rockies were the Banff Springs, Glacier House in the Rogers Pass, which would be demolished the following year in 1929, Mount Stephen House and Field, which would stand until 1963 when it was demolished and replaced by today's Field Station, which ironically enough hasn't seen a passenger train since 1990, and the Chateau Lake Louise, which was gaining a lot of popularity by this time with its new expansion after a fire of its own in July of 1924. And yes, the Chateau Lake Louise will be the focus of the next episode in this series of the Grand Railway Hotels of Canada. Now, the Banff Springs Hotel would continue to boom, and when Canadian Pacific had launched their new passenger train, the Dominion, in 1933, they had the most luxurious way for passengers to experience the Rockies. And this would attract high-end clientele until the start of World War II, where it all came to a screeching halt, and the Banff Springs Hotel would close its doors from 1942 until 45. Now, by rail, by sea, and by air was the Canadian Pacific slogan at the time. And they didn't have any stock in automobiles, but Banff exists because of the railway. So in 1955, Canadian Pacific had made their biggest investment to date, debuting their brand new passenger fleet, which was a stainless steel consist, custom built, with scenic viewing domes across the top of the train. And I mean, these cars were literally built for the rocky peaks around Banff. And this train was named the Canadian and would continue the timeless tradition of being Canada's favorite way to travel by train. Going from Montreal and Toronto, following the shores of the Lake Superior into Thunder Bay, into the prairies, arriving here in Winnipeg at the Canadian Pacific Station, west into Calgary outside the Palliser Hotel, and into the Rockies here at the Banff Heritage Station, around Morant's Curve into Lake Louise, before heading into the Selkirk Mountains of Revelstoke, and finally arriving 3,000 kilometers west in Vancouver at Waterfront Station. But this glory was extremely short-lived because the hotel would adapt to the clientele arriving on the train, more representing the middle class, and into the rear view were the days where only the rich and the elites and the most famous stayed at Banff Castle, including Marilyn Monroe. And in 1962, the Trans-Canada Highway would be completed due to the rise of the automobile, now connecting Canada ocean to ocean by road as well, making Banff even more accessible by car with better roads all year round. And as a result, the Banff Springs Hotel would open for its first winter season in December of 1969. But that didn't go very well, and since Canadian Pacific's business model at the time was, if it's not making us money, destroy it, the hotel demolition was actually heavily considered after the summer season of 1970. And again, I know it's hard to believe considering how popular the hotel is now, but back then, this was how the Canadian Pacific did business. And in 1980, Calgary, Banff, and Lake Louise would host the 1988 Winter Olympics, and the hotel would go through a few renovations, one of which included the conversion of the outdoor pool into a hot pool, and spoiler alert, it is awesome. Fast forward to April of 2024, we turn the page from past to present here at the base of Sulphur Mountain where lies the Banff Springs Hotel, where history and beauty converge to create an experience unlike any other. Now, people come from all over the world for a trip of a lifetime to stay at the Banff Springs Hotel, and we're absolutely no different. I live in Vancouver, so this video starts with picking up Bella and heading from the Canadian Pacific's western terminus of Vancouver east through the Okanagan and into the Selkirks, where we would make a quick pit stop just east of the last spike to get a taste of the hot springs before settling in the Revelstoke for the night.
And if there's one thing that I know about Banff and the Rockies, it's that they're super dry, which is why I always travel with Tiege Hanley, today's video sponsor. Tiege Hanley is uncomplicated skincare for men. They give you everything you need, nothing you don't. I'm using the level 1 system here, and it's got all the essentials you're going to need, from their daily face wash to the AM moisturizer with sun protection to the PM moisturizer before bed, and a twice a week exfoliating face scrub, as well as a few other goodies, including the silicone body scrubber. Now, I've been using Tiege for coming up on almost 4 years now, and because Tiege is sponsoring this video, you can get up to 40% off your first skincare system and that free body scrubber when you click that first link in the video description. That's 40% off a life-changing skincare system, and you'll find out why they have over 7,000 5-star reviews. And I want to say thank you so much to Tiege Hanley for sponsoring this video. The next morning, I took Wally, our corgi, to go gas up the SUV. I then kicked him out of the passenger seat because he's a pet, and that's also Bella's seat. And after that, we headed from the Selkirks into the Canadian Rockies towards Banff National Park in our stay at Canada's Castle. And upon check-in, it's kind of surreal getting the car valeted because, this is really happening. We were actually staying at Canada's most famous hotel. And upon walking through the revolving door entrance, I was blown away because the magic that makes this place so special is alive and well in more ways than one. Because I found out upon check-in that because of my status with Fairmont Hotels, they gave us a complimentary upgrade to a suite, which I could not wait to see. So we headed up to the 6th floor to our home for the next 2 nights in a suite absolutely fit for royalty.
No way. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful.
Oh, look at that view.
Look at the view. Oh my goodness. Look at these freaking mountains. Holy.
Now, the town of Banff was originally just a siding for the Canadian Pacific Railway through the Bow Valley en route to the Pacific Ocean, known as Siding 29. And the town was named by Canadian Pacific President of 1884, George Stephen, after his birthplace of Banff, Scotland, which, ironically enough, as you can see here, looks absolutely nothing like the Canadian Rockies and more like my birthplace in the prairies of Winnipeg outside the Fort Garry Hotel, which, don't worry, that'll be a dedicated video later on in the series. After that, we went for a quick bite to eat in downtown Banff, and when we came back to the hotel, we were in for a big surprise. The pastry team had just delivered 2 scratch-made chocolate cakes and champagne while we were gone, complimentary on the house for Bella's birthday, and we would toast to a great next 2 nights with my glass of air since I don't drink. And this was no joke the best chocolate cake, the best cake period, I've ever tasted in my life. And to the Banff Springs Pastry Kitchen, thank you so much for not just an amazing cake, but a treat for Wally, our honorary custodian, also known as a corgi. And although I'm not as versed in handcrafted dog treats, I'm sure he felt the exact same way about his goat-shaped cookie as we did about this outstanding chocolate cake. Now we are at the Banff Springs Hotel, and it's named that because it has the Banff Springs. So we would break the cardinal rule of swimming immediately after eating and headed down to the outdoor pool shortly after. And this video honestly doesn't do it justice, because sitting in 80-degree water in mid-April with the Rocky Mountains in the backdrop, as well as a few furry visitors, it really brings this area to life and absolutely emphasizes the nature that the hotel exists in. And shortly after that, I had an announcement to make. Cannonball! And yes, I did a cannonball in the pool once everybody had left to not ruin the peace of sitting in the hot springs water. And after that, it was off to bed for a full day of activities ahead of us tomorrow morning. This morning we got up early and headed to Surprise Corner to watch the sunrise over the rugged Rocky Peaks. Now, this is one of Canada's most photographed spots, and it was discovered in 1920 when the Canadian Pacific Railway began offering cash incentives for photographers to find powerful stills of the Banff Springs Hotel for them to market, and Surprise Corner Viewpoint was the winner. This was to bring travelers from around the world on a Canadian Pacific passenger train to experience the magic of the Canadian Rockies in Banff. And 2.5 kilometers north of the hotel lies the Banff Station, and when you came to the Banff Springs Hotel, you would arrive here at the Canadian Pacific Station, whether it was on the Dominion that ran from 1933 until 1966, or Canada's most famous passenger train, the Canadian, running here from April of 1955 until 1990. This is going to be a common theme across the series, because in the 1970s, passenger rail service was dying, and by 1978, the Canadian Pacific had completely removed themselves from the passenger rail service industry, handing off all service to the new government crown corporation we know today as Via Rail Canada. And although at first this was very successful, with maintaining daily departures in both directions to Calgary and Lake Louise from here in Banff, 1990 saw passenger service to Banff cut by the Canadian government in favor of service to the Northern Canadian National Line. And don't get me wrong, Jasper and Mount Robson are absolutely beautiful, but it doesn't compare to the magic of the Rockies in Banff, especially when you compare the over 500,000 riders through Banff in 1989 compared to the 170,000 through Jasper the year prior. This would cut ridership by over 70%, and on January 14th of 1990, the final long-distance passenger train would depart Banff out of the Canadian Rockies heading east towards Calgary, and 35 years later, the station is only a distant memory of the golden era of rail travel, where passenger trains ruled the Rockies, and the Banff Springs Hotel was the Grand Railway Hotel for its passengers. Now, back at the hotel after a morning excursion was an absolutely mandatory caffeine hit. And although I do consider myself a bit of a coffee lover, actually, scratch that, a huge coffee lover, I think that Banff Springs offers possibly the best drip coffee I've had in a very long time. But we didn't stick around the hotel for very long after that because we wanted to experience great outdoors. So we would leave the hotel, head down the road about 20 minutes towards Two Jack Lake, where we played a little bit of fetch with Wally, took in the scenery and the amazing surrounding landscapes. And then I got the crazy idea of going for a swim in this glacier-fed water, which was by far the coldest water I've ever been in my life. But God, is it good for the body. And shortly after that, we headed back into Banff to hike Tunnel Mountain, originally named by the Canadian Pacific after the tunnel that they wanted to blast through the mountain to pass a train through. This does take about an hour to hike to get to the top, but the view of the Palliser mountain ranges in the distance and looking down on the entire township of Banff and our castle for one more night is super relaxing and worth every single second of that trek up to the top. And after that, we would head down the mountain towards the hotel for some chow. And spoiler alert, Chef Garante absolutely delivers here. So Bella opted for the house-made chicken noodle soup, and the chicken stock smelled absolutely incredible. And for me, I got the grilled chicken breast with grilled broccolini, potato puree, and jus. And all I'm going to say about mine was it was the definition of finger-licking good, because I was literally doing shots of jus out of the boat that it came in by the end of it. It was that good. And after that, we would finish with a little bit of leftover room service coffee from earlier in the day and some chocolate cake that we still hadn't eaten from our arrival. But it doesn't end here. The Mount Rundle Bar offers a house-made ginger ale composed of freshly pureed ginger, simple syrup, club soda, and fresh citrus to finish. And Belle and I absolutely love ginger ale, and this was literally the perfect drink for playing pool with. And shout out to our bartender Max, he did an absolutely outstanding job. Now, the other restaurant we visited during our stay was the Vermilion Room, which is named after the Vermilion Lakes, which are the extremely shallow lakes you'll see along the edge of the highway when you enter into Banff. And Bella got the chicken and pear salad today. I had the braised beef short rib dip on sourdough. And my God, this might have been one of the best sandwiches I've had in my life. Like, they are doing an absolute real deal here at the Banff Springs Hotel, and the views don't get any better. Or should I say Notch 8, which is a reference that only the rail fans and true train lovers are going to get. The hotel also has a official Canadian Pacific store on the main floor, which offers some really cool memorabilia from books on the history of the hotel and the railways that built it. But this video can't all be positive, and I hate to be the bad news bears, But here's the worst part about my stay. Checkout. Because whether it's soaking in the outdoor hot pool, or the super friendly staff, to the unmatched dining experience, to the nature that surrounds the hotel from every single angle, the Banff Springs has truly earned the nickname Canada's Castle for a reason, and it's something that its visionary Cornelius Van Horn would be incredibly proud of today. The Banff Springs Hotel is an absolute bucket list stay that I was lucky enough to get to experience here, and setting the bar to a standard so high that I'm excited to see how the rest of the Grand Railway hotels in this series keep up with. And although this is a story driven by Canada's most iconic hotels, whether it's here at the Chateau, at Canada's Castle in Banff, across the prairies of the Fort Garry in Winnipeg, or the Castle on the River in Saskatoon, this series traveling across Canada to share the stories of its Grand Railway hotels is my love letter to my country and the brave men that put it all on the line to map the West, build an ocean-to-ocean railway. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss next week's video on the Chateau Lake Louise. And in the meantime, as we head out of Banff and down the Trans-Canada Highway for one more quick game of fetch in the Kicking Horse River in the town of Field, we're heading back home to Vancouver, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode at the next Grand Railway Hotel. I'll see you then.